Hi everybody, this is Karin Gunderson with Caring Journey and Heavenly Harp. I've been doing integrative therapies for about 20 years and I love to help people find healing and be able to move forward with joy and peace and gratitude in their lives. Today, I wanted to talk to you about what really happens surrounding death since I saw so much of it as a hospice harp practitioner for 11 years. I played for over 25,000 patients and their families. And during that time, I was with hundreds of people when they actually died. And at first I thought these people must be just seeing hallucinations because every time I would go in and start playing, they would start talking to people I couldn't see. And I thought it's got to just be the medications they're on. But I soon realized that it wasn't when I played for these two men in the same room. The one man had been brought in a day before the other man. He was farthest from the door. He was behind a curtain. He was from Chechnya. He didn't speak any English. He didn't have any family in the U.S. He was brought in unconscious and very close to death, and he never did regain consciousness. The following day, a regular American guy was brought in. He was sitting with his wife on the other side of the curtain, and he was just there for medication adjustment. He was alert and talking. And I had been playing out in the hall, and I asked them if they'd like me to bring the harp in, and they said, oh, yes, so I brought it in. And almost as soon as I started playing, this American guy's wife came up to me and said, you'd never guess what happened while you were out there playing in the hall. I said, what? And she said, well, all of a sudden, my husband started looking around the room, and he goes, what are all these Chechnyans doing in here? Now, there's no way he could have known his roommate was from Chechnya because that guy had been unconscious the whole time, didn't have any visitors, and they're so careful about privacy issues at hospice. So obviously something changes with the way that we see as we get closer to going home to heaven. And evidently it doesn't matter whether it's your visitors or someone else's. But I think that should be a wonderful comfort, that nobody dies alone. Here was this man who had no family, and yet his roommate saw many people surrounding him as he drew close to death. The second thing I want to tell you about the death and that dying part of it is that often people are at their loved ones' bedsides for days or weeks, and then they finally get talked into going home for a shower or out for a cup of coffee, and that's when their loved one dies. And then they are so upset. If only I hadn't left then, and they're just feeling guilty and everything. Well, I want to tell you that the number of times that this happens is beyond coincidence. These people chose to go when you weren't there because they thought it would be too hard for you to see them go. And so if they left when you weren't there, don't feel bad about that. They loved you so much that they didn't want you to have to see them leave. And not only that, but they were surrounded by lots of friends and loved ones, so they were not alone. The second thing that I noticed that the patients were seeing was angels. And I could always tell when they were seeing the angels because instead of looking out in front of them, like the patients saw when they saw friends and loved ones who had gone before them, was that they would be looking up. And they would be following this around the room. And if I asked them, they would tell me that they were angels and that they were silverish or bluish or kind of see-through. But what I love is they always said that the angels were dancing. And I just love that thought that it's such a celebration when we come home that the angels just have to dance. And it was interesting because when I shared this with one person, he had a friend who had been with him in the army, and his friend had been quite a heavy drinker, and he ended up getting grazed across the top of the head with a bullet when they were in exercises, and he ended up in one of those big open medical units and was actually out unconscious for about 24 hours. And when he regained consciousness, he said that there were angels everywhere up by the ceiling dancing. Well, one of the angels, I'm assuming these were all the soldiers' guardian angels that were in there. And one of the angels, which was probably his guardian angel, stopped dancing, looked at him and went. And he said, my friend never took another drink after that. He figured that he had gotten his fair warning and it was time to shape up. Well, then when it's time to go, people are just so peaceful that you don't even realize that they've gone, except that their skin starts to not look real. And other times they have been in a coma for 2 or 3 weeks, because at hospice they don't do intravenous fluids and that kind of thing. So they're very emaciated, they haven't had anything, and they can't move themselves at all. So the hospice staff ends up having to turn them every little while so they don't get bed sores, because they can't move themselves. And yet many of these people, these same people, when it comes time to go, will go, "I see Jesus," or "Take me home, Jesus." One lady said, "Who's that standing at the end of my bed?" And then she said, "It's you, Jesus." Another one said, "Mom." And then she looked over and said, "It's okay, Jesus, you can take me now." But my favorite one was a lady who said, "Now, Jesus, you just stay right there and don't you move." I figured she must have been a teacher, but she was not going to lose him at that point. And, you know, I had never really thought about what happens at the point of death before I started doing this work. As a Christian, I grew up in that faith and I always had it. And I didn't think about, well, what happens to people of other religions? So I was really surprised that it didn't seem to matter whether it was a Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, atheist, agnostic, LDS, Christian, Catholic. It's Jesus who comes when it's time to go. They all know who he is, and they all know that he's the way home. And I think that the reason that it's Jesus that comes is because he had come as a man before, and so he's the only form of God that we wouldn't be afraid of. And the Bible says more than any other thing, do not be afraid. God doesn't want us to live in fear. So I hope that these stories have helped you and encouraged you so that you don't have to be afraid concerning death, because you will not be alone one step of the way, and there is something wonderful waiting on the other side for you. I care about you. God cares about you. We're on this journey together. If you enjoyed this, please make sure you go to YouTube, my Caring Journey channel with a K, and go ahead and subscribe. That would help me out a lot. And if you'd like to get regular notifications, you just click on the bell. Also, if you like it, more people will be able to find it. And lastly, I'd love to hear your comments, your questions, and anything else that you'd like to share. Thanks so much. Love you. Have a great day.